All righty. So we should be live. Hi, JoEllen.
Hello, hello.
All right. Well, here we are on video number 2 of 4. So I'd love to see, just to make sure we're up and running, can you put in the, not you, JoEllen, just people who are there, come visit us in the chat, send us your name, where you're from, and then we'll know what's going on. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channels, please do. We come out with lots of helpful videos just on story editing and, how to edit, do it yourself. JoEllen's favorite acronym, do it for you. Okay, good. So I see Kara and Phil. Okay, so that's good. I mean, I really just want to know.
It's working.
That's the most stressful part about the whole presentation is
South Africa again. It's South Africa. I love it when I see so many from all over: Indiana, New York, Ontario, Chicago.
Oh, Ontario. I'm Kingston, Ontario. Woohoo! I'm in Tipperary, Ontario, so really not that far.
Coming on in. The meet and greet.
Yeah, we'll just give it a couple of seconds before we get going. If you weren't here for the first session, I've put the link right. The very first comment at the top is a link to that first session. It's on JoEllen's YouTube channel for FirstEditing. So we're tag teaming between the two of us so that we can, she host, I host, she host, I host, makes it just a little bit easier for us to fit these in a little bit quicker for everybody. We've got a jam-packed session today to talk about the high-level story edit that needs to be done before the detailed story edit on a scene-by-scene basis, which is what we're going to cover next. I also put up at the top a link to the an insider's view or an insider's guide to an insider's view of story editing. I should know the name of my own course that we have on. We have a sale on right now for $39 instead of $99. The link is at the top and the coupon's at the top. So trying to be organized this time. Okay, so it looks like we've got lots of people coming in. So JoEllen, should we just get right into it? I'll share my screen and we'll go.
Yeah, absolutely.
All righty. All right. So JoEllen, if you can just confirm you're seeing a chart that says FirstEditing Essentials number 2.
That is positive.
Okay, good. Affirmative. Excellent. So, and now to confirm that my screen clicked forward on top 10 structural editing steps.
Yes, we have them. So everybody take really fast notes. No.
Yeah. This is the agenda. It's not the, as we promised last time, we're doing 10 things every time. So this is the top 10 structural editing steps. So we're going to talk about the blurb, talk about the importance of reading through your manuscript, the story arc, creating a synopsis at this stage in your writing, word count per scene, scenes per chapter, point of view balance, opening, closing types, and then we're going to wind back right around to the story arc because you're going to need that when you start your scene-by-scene editing. So I'm going to start off and talk about the blurb and the importance for an author to write a blurb at this phase. And the reason this is important is that it's going to keep you focused while you do your story edit. And here I've just taken the example of the Born Identity. Clearly, I like this book because I use it all the time, but it's also a very clear example of, in the blurb, what should be there is who's the protagonist. In this case, it's Jason Bourne. And so as you're doing your story edit from the high level and the scene by scene level, it's important to remember all the time who's the protagonist. And then what is their story problem? In this case, it's who is Jason Bourne because he's lost his memory. And so what this means is that every scene in your novel should take the protagonist closer to or farther away from the story problem and whether he's going to succeed or not. And then the next thing is what's at stake. And in this case, it's his life because he's delving into some things that, are very dangerous for him. And then people try and kill him. So it doesn't need to be that dramatic, but there has to be something at stake for the protagonist. And if you know this about your story, you're in a great place to start your story edit. And for this time, the blurb is for you. It's for nobody else. So it doesn't have to be polished and perfectly written. But if it has these 3 things, you're on a good start.
And it's really important because you use this when you're self-editing. And we also use that as editors because it helps us keep us focused on, what we are supposed to see and anticipate and know what's happening. And you're making a promise to your readers, a promise to your audience. So let's make sure that those match. And if they don't, your editor is going to tell you where and what, or you'll discover it yourself when you're doing the self-editing, either way.
Right. So now what we're going to do, JoEllen's going to talk to you about why doing a read through is very important.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're going to take a lot of notes through all this, but you're not going to make any changes at this time. So you're just going to take a bunch of notes and you're going to go through your entire book nice and slow. Just enjoy it. Just read it from that perspective. And you're not going to make any changes. You're going to keep track of the revisions that you want to make at that time so that you can come back to that, because this is going to identify the key areas of your book. So you're going to be looking at the story arc scenes, those 5 key scenes that are there. And you're going to be referencing this throughout. You're going to use all of this to get to your synopsis, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you're putting all this together so you know exactly that all the pieces are there and that you're attacking them in the order that they should be. And if not, that you can kind of find those little holes and we can come back to them later. So it's a good time to take notes, but don't get too caught up into it and start digging in. Just read it from an overall perspective because you're really going on the high level then.
Right. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a second because I want to just reiterate how very important these 2 steps are. So it may feel like you're not doing anything yet, but you are. So when you set yourself up properly, and this read through, I've done it, and it just is so beneficial, particularly if you put it away for a little bit and then sit down and just plow through it. And then you're now set up. And so the reason I'm pausing here is just set yourself up right, and the whole story edit will go much faster.
Exactly.
Yeah, back to share screen.
Oh, okay.
Wait. I wanted to highlight that because it's so important. Okay, you should be seeing read through.
We are.
Okay, perfect. All right. So now that you've written your blurb and you've done your read through, we're going to talk about the story arc. And everybody knows I'm a bit of a story arc geeky person. I love the story arc. And I'm just going to quickly go through the importance of the story arc to convince you why you should look at it. You can always do what you want. You're the artist with your book, but these are guidelines, and it's a form that's been around since the beginning of time. And my favorite example is Beowulf. And to come up with this story arc, I looked at J.R.R. Tolkien's translation of Beowulf. And he does his inciting incident at 10%, where Beowulf is chosen as a warrior. And I wanted to say something interesting. JoEllen and I had a discussion this morning about that 10% mark and what it might mean for today's writers. Right. And I heard somewhere that Amazon, when they put up a sample, they put up 10% of a novel. Now, I'm not 100% unsure on that, but it's a really interesting data point to look at why it's important to have something significant happen early in your book.
Exactly. I think that's a fantastic part because you've got to have some kind of a hook. So, making sure that all those pieces are there and that inciting incident gets them to the point where they can click that buy now. Keep reading, click, buy now, click.
Yeah. And if you have a book that's up that's not selling, it might be worth just reading the sample and seeing what's in there. And is the inciting incident there? Normally we say it's before 15%, and that can be perfectly fine. But if there's an issue with the book selling, that's a point to look at.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you're self-published, you can always pull a book down and republish it and fix that. So don't forget that little advantage that you have.
Yeah.
So then the plot point 1 comes at 25% in this book, dead on, and it's when Beowulf kills Grendel. And then Beowulf kills Grendel's mother. Now that sounds very mean, but she wasn't that nice person anyway. So that's at 50%, right at the middle plot point. And then plot point 2 comes right at 73%. And it's when he learns that his home is being ravaged by dragons. And then the climax comes right on time. It's a little late there, but that's okay. It's still within range. of Beowulf fights and kills the dragons. So my point of showing this is a story that's been around forever. And if you follow the journey of stories, this story arc fits most of those stories. And so when we're looking at it, we've got, before 15% the inciting incident, 20 to 30 is the plot point 1, 40, that should really be 45 to 55 is the middle plot point, 70, 80 is plot point 2, and 85 to 95 for the climax. And do remember these are ranges, and it's to make you think about if your plot points are there, great. If they're out of these ranges, think about why, and is there a really strong reason for it? Okay, now I know this chart is a lot to read, but I don't expect you actually to read it. What I want to show you is some of the key story arcs and definitions of what needs to be in a story over time, starting with the Poetics back in Aristotle, all the way up to Jessica Brody's Save the Cat Writes a Novel. And what all of these different forms have in common is they all have the 5 key plot points that we put into Fictionary in the story arc. So the Fictionary story arc brings all of these down to a simple form, but that's still very valuable. And then if you follow any of these forms, you can go and put in your scenes in between and absolutely follow these methods. They're all great methods. They all work. We're just trying to make it a little easier by putting it down into 5 points.
Exactly. And it's very, very important to have all that. So
yeah. And looking at it in this way too, it also triggers your imagination when you think, oh, I need a scene for this or for that. And so some of these forms are really interesting just from that perspective. If you're looking for ideas, if you're stuck a little bit, it's a great way to figure out different scenes to add to your book.
Yeah, it really is a recipe, and you got to make sure all your ingredients are there, because if it's not, it's just not going to turn out the way you think. And so I know that, part of it is being the creative, and we love that part, but really, if you miss the foundation, so.
Yep, it's true. Absolutely. So if we look at the story arc analysis, so when you've done your read through, you're going to list out what you think are the 5 key scenes in your story. So the first thing you want to do on that read through, you're not making any changes. Remember, you're just marking things. And so you'll look, do all of those 5 plot points exist? That's question number 1. Question number 2 that you need to answer is, do they accomplish what they need to do? And question number 3 is, are they in the right place? And if all 5 scenes don't accomplish their goals or don't exist or are not located in the right place, and that they're not close enough, there's no story yet. And so this is what you need to do to actually get to a story.
Right. This is what the editors are looking for. This is what the tool was built on. This is why we are going through this again and again. So, Kristina knew this, so she's coming in and she's put this together in her fantastic software. So you can pull this up and see it if you're struggling. But again, the behind the scenes here is this is what editors are looking for, because these are the necessary parts. So it's really, really important, even though it may not be as creative. It is the essentials. It's the bones underneath all the meat there. So. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. So let's just do a quick review of what those 5 key scenes need to do.
Exactly.
So the first one is the inciting incident. So that's the moment the protagonist's world changes in a dramatic way. And if you remember in your blurb, you wrote down who the protagonist was. So now you're looking at that character and what's changed. Plot point 1 is point of no return. And this is the protagonist can't back out of the central conflict. So again, the central conflict should be in your blurb somewhere of what is that problem. And then at plot point 1, they can't back out of that problem, whatever it is. The middle plot point, the protagonist moves from reactive to proactive. Then at plot point 2, it's a low point for the protagonist. So here it's probably looking like they're not going to achieve their main story goal. And then the climax, the protagonist faces the biggest challenge yet and determines their own fate and answers the story question in the blurb. So the climax must answer that question. Either the protagonist succeeded or they failed. One or the other. It's got to be answered, or the story isn't over. And if the story isn't over, you don't have a story by definition of a story. It needs to have a resolution after the climax scene. So I'm just going to reiterate, you need all 5 scenes. They have to do what they're supposed to do, and they should be generally in the right place.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we're going to move on, and JoEllen is going to talk to you about synopsis.
Exactly. And the book synopsis is basically a summary of your novel, and it's the start to finish. So what we've just covered in that story arc is what you're outlining here in your rough draft, your synopsis, and it's going to keep you focused as you revive. That's why we went through that beginning. We did the blurb to make sure we knew what our promises are, and then we did the read through, and we just made notes, and now we've outlined what we have on those 5 points, and now we're going to use that to just create that rough draft, and it'll help you continue to work on it, and you'll know where the scene should be placed. And of course, it's including those first things that we talked about, the protagonist, the main story goal, and each of the 5 key points. And it's really working through. So you want to check your blurb, and remember that you in the synopsis here, you're looking at the formation here. You're not working with the prose, you're working with the story. So you're staying up high, you're working with it, and you're going to give that all an outline there. And it really should allow you to see your story in a little bit more sequential, and how are they working together, because you should see if it's even or uneven in places. And we're going to show you how to do that more. But again, this is fulfilling that story arc and seeing how it lands and how it feels, and that you're answering those questions, because if you don't have the beginning, middle, and the end, then we've got a problem.
Yeah, and again, just to reiterate, this is for you, and it's for you to, or you, the writer, not you, JoEllen. It's for the writer to reference as they're going through. And editors sometimes do this too, and they'll actually include a synopsis when they send you your editorial package, so that you see what they see in their story. So both an editor and a writer can have value from this. And again, it keeps you focused on the story and from getting carried away and starting to write things that, are fun to write, but might not be part of this particular story.
Of course.
Okay, so we're going to talk about word count per scene. And if everybody remembers, what we're looking at story structure today. We're not looking at individual scene evaluation. So it's really important for pacing and also for story balance to understand what your word count per scene is. And this is just a snapshot out of Fictionary of a novel that is 75,000 words, 98 scenes, 98 scenes. Minimum word count is 317 and max is 1,400-ish. So it's not bad. You can see on the bottom, the graph is sort of showing the ups and downs. And here with word count per scene, there's different things you can do. And one is, if you have a scene that is inordinately longer than all of your other scenes, and it's not the climax scene, then perhaps there's something in there that could be cut, or the scene could be split into more than one scene. It's a way of looking at your word count in pieces so that your reader feels balanced when they're reading it. And if you have a story that runs around 1,000 words average per scene, and then all of a sudden there's a 3,000 word scene, the reader's going to get kind of bogged down and start to wonder, well, why is this so important? And if it's not, it's a problem for the story. The other thing, if a scene is too short compared to the others, and this is fine. So some scenes are meant to be short. It's got a really strong point. It's just boom. And particularly thriller novels do this, where it could be one line or one word even. It's just a boom thing and off you go. But it's good to go and look at the shortest scenes and see, was that your intent? Or does it lack description? Is it an empty stage where it's just two characters talking back and forth but nothing around them? It gives you a way to look at those shorter scenes and really have a sense of, did you mean it to be short, or is it short because you didn't get around to really fleshing it out and making it a solid scene?
Right.
And and then of course you want to look at your 5 key scenes and see that you've given the scene enough word count to show its importance in the story. And then the other thing you can do, clearly I love word count per scene, you can increase pacing by shortening scenes. So as you're leading up to the climax, you can go kind of shorter, and then boom, the climax scene can be longer. But the reader will pick up the you're getting faster and faster and faster, so they can tell you're leading to something, and then out comes the climax scene where You want to give the reader time to really experience that climax scene, because you're going to answer the main story question and they want to know, was it successful or not? And how did the protagonist accomplish it or not? And then the resolution you can fit lengthwise depending on how much resolution you actually need. Some need much less. Some stories need more. Stories leading into a series, you might have a bit of additional stuff just to lead into the next book in the series.
Exactly. And when you're looking at those individual scenes, that also allows you to go back and reassess the structure and the chapters. So you can assess you work on the scenes first and then the chapters, and it helps you come in there.
Well, and there you are. There's your chapters.
There you go. There you go. Very important.
Very important. So here, this is an interesting example. It's from a novel that I edited. And you can see the kind of the lilac color there, that's a lot of scenes in one chapter. Yeah. And it's too many. That the scenes were not related to one another. There wasn't a theme. It wasn't a consistent point of view. There was no reason to have all of those scenes together. And so it was a very easy fix for the writer to look at that and go, okay, so how could these scenes be combined? And what we ended up doing was moving some of the scenes around. So there was a few scenes grouped by theme, some grouped by point of view, some grouped by time. And so not only did it impact the scene length, but it impacted the order of the story to have it in a much more effective pattern. So all of the scenes actually needed to be in the story, but they didn't need to be in the same chapter. And again, here, a reader's going to get off balance when they read short, maybe 2 or 3 scenes per chapter. They're used to that pattern. And then all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of scenes, and it's jarring to the reader, and they might not know why, but it's going to be uncomfortable. And you can see the gray line on, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Very heavy. It's very heavy in the middle. You've got these short scenes, you're going, and then all of a sudden it's like you're just drowning.
Yeah. And, and particularly think about reading on a small device and you're going slide, 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 slide. And it just, you think, when am I ever going to get to this end of this chapter? And you can't leave a clear exit hook if the scenes aren't related. It makes it really difficult for the story to be strong. And when you look at this gray line, you can see it's very unbalanced on how many scenes are in every chapter. Right. And again, it's easy. It's a really important structural thing to fix, but it's one of the ones that's a little bit easier to fix when you see where your scenes are actually sitting in a chapter. And just a little yay for Fictionary, because it's mine. It does give you a visual way to see how many chapters are in a scene versus looking at a straight MS Word document that you can clearly see where it is and then fix the problem.
Yeah, much better. Lord knows we've advanced far beyond Excel and Word. So thank goodness.
Although I do love Excel, but it has its needs, and some of us still need it. But
so again, you're doing your scenes per chapter and the point of view balance. Is that where we're going next?
Yes.
So we're gonna well, this is of course where you're going into each scene and you're looking at the point of view. So you need to make sure that your key scenes, those 5 key scenes we're talking about with our story arc, that your protagonists and the important people are there, and perhaps the point of view is from there, because if not, something is wrong, and maybe they're not your actual protagonist, or maybe that's not the right scene that you think it is. So these things kind of have to match. They're just little pieces of the puzzles that go together. So one of the great things here is that when you have each scene, you have those outlined, and you can take notes or whatever, but in the software here, it tells you, okay, this character is in these scenes and this is where it's happening, and it allows you to review it, because in the same way that your key scenes have a higher word count, your point of view characters for each scene should have a higher amount of that character will have a more presence via the word count. So they're getting points for each word there. And so they you can see if that is actually a protagonist or if it's somebody else, or sometimes you have characters who have very, very few words to them and they're in scenes, and maybe that character is not necessary. There can be, you can clean up things very easily by seeing who's getting the dominant amount of attention and the point of view, and maybe where if something isn't being managed by the best character at the time, who you could slide that around and fix it. So it's very important because that lets you look at the balance between your characters and your scenes and your chapters overall, which of course balances your entire story and allows you to go through all that and allows you to clean up. And even if you don't know, you may sense it. The great part is just by going through this process, because you will not, most people, this takes time. It takes a lot of time to figure out. So if you're just kind of learning and you're going through that, that's fine. Just kind of circle and say, it doesn't feel right. And that alone, coming into an editor with a real question, with a real problem, and saying, okay, I know that we're kind of here and it's heavy here and I don't know why, gives them a really firm objective and lets them communicate with you better, because it's so much more exciting for us to have somebody who's really interested in the back end. It's like, somebody who drives the car and somebody who's kind of another car enthusiast, and you pull up the hood and you start looking at the engine and you go, yeah, okay, here we are. This is where the problem is, and it's making the sound. I don't know what it is. You don't have to be able to fix it, but it really helps the editor zone in and not be distracted by other things. I mean, we're going through this methodically, but at the same point, it's really nice when you can use them to your full advantage by knowing what you need help with, and sometimes knowing what you don't know, which sounds weird, but it doesn't feel right. And, I don't get it. We don't like to hear that. But at the same point, you can say there's a sense here, there's something going on in this area. And then they can come in and diagnose that a little bit better for you to make sure it's balanced. And again, making sure that the point of view relates with the scenes and the characters and all of that works out for you.
Yeah, so I'll just add a couple of things to that. And one is, this is something that you do both from a structural level and from a scene by scene level. So today what we're talking about is just looking at the balance and the order of point of view. So when you're doing your structural edit, do you have that right? And then when you get to a scene by scene edit, you will very carefully edit each scene from the point of view. And so at this stage, you're looking at, does your protagonist have the point of view for scene one? And if they don't, you need to have a good reason why, because the first character a reader reads about, they think it's the protagonist. And lots of books with prologues start with a different character. There's many examples. You can absolutely do it. Just be careful you're doing it for a reason and not just because you started your story in a certain place. And you can see by this example out of Fictionary, this book has a lot of point of view characters. And so it doesn't give the reader enough time to connect to any of them. And then what I would recommend here is you look for scenes where the point of view character has one scene, and see if you can rewrite that from a different point of view character scene. And if you can, just make a note. You don't have to rewrite that scene now, because you're going to do it when you do your scene by scene edit. What you're doing here is looking for your revision plan at the scene level. And if you're happy with your point of view, you're going to leave it alone while you're doing your scene by scene. But this is the place that's going to tell you from a high level perspective, is it going to work for a story or not?
Exactly.
Okay. Now we will go to opening and closing types.
Opening and closing. So we got a variety of those.
Yes, we do. So these are, again, something that you see at a scene level, but you evaluate at a story level. And so here you're looking at the scene opening types on one side have a nice balance between thought, action, dialogue, and description. And on the scene closing type, there's not much action. So here as a writer, you have some decisions to make. If you're writing a thriller, this is probably the wrong balance, that you want more action. If you're writing a book that is mostly character development and there's a lot of thought, it's probably okay. So you've got all four types, but you still want to evaluate, is it right for your genre? So you kind of have to know your genre expectations, which is a great, big, huge topic. So again, here, what you're looking at you're looking at your big, big picture story level of how you're using each of these. And if you don't like it, then you can go through and change the opening types or the closing types for the scenes that you would like to have change.
Exactly. Exactly. And it should have some balance there. I mean, if it's again and again the same way, you need to shake it up so it's a little bit more interesting. You can't constantly be ending every scene like, and she wondered, and she
Right.
wondered, and she
Right.
wondered. And then we stop wondering and we put down the book and walk away because it's not
And
engaging.
that's a great point, JoEllen. And that right there is that the repetitive stuff, it has to be varied. And so if you are deciding you want a lot of your scenes to end in thought, they have to be written in a different manner. And you can look at if you're worried about it, just go through and read the scene endings of every scene, and you'll see it. In Fictionary, you can look in our reading room, you can see the beginnings or the ends of each scene. And you can really quickly look for patterns and go, oh, I did. She wondered, she wondered, she wondered, she wondered. I can't do that. If you see it all together in a row, it's really obvious. And that will help you vary it up. And I'm glad you mentioned that because it's really important for reader enjoyment of the book.
Oh, and that's who we're writing for. Again, I know this is all, an enjoyment and a creative process, and it's also learning and getting to expand new things by learning editing and that. But in the end, you're making a promise to your readers, your audience. And if you fail to deliver on that, then you don't have an audience, and you won't have an agent or anything else beyond that either. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very important that they go there. Somebody asked a question here. You may have already answered this, but do you have to add all this information, or does Fictionary automatically separate this information from your story? And the cool part is that yes, a lot of it is all done for you. So you put it in there and it's and that allows you, and that's one of the great parts, this is the software that we're using behind the scenes as editors, and it allows you to have a better conversation, a better dialogue with them when you get to a point where you're frustrated and you just, that's it, or when you really want to dig in deeper. And either way, the editor's there to help you, but it also will help you save money when you're coming in to work with a professional editor, because it is an expensive process. So if you are one of those whizzes who can do it all yourself, that's fantastic. It'll be really easy for the editor to get in there on a line edit afterwards. But if you're struggling with this, then you have story coaches who can help you through all that. So it's good. And there was another question earlier, and I didn't ignore you. It's just we kept going. It was in regards to the 5-plot point chart again at the end. She's trying to take notes, and the 3 things a blurb needs. And we're going to send them all this as a handout, right?
We can, absolutely, because I know it is there's a lot of information here, but the 3 things for the blurb are: who is the protagonist, mm-hmm. what's their main story goal, and what's at stake. Exactly. So if you just remember, it's Jason Bourne. He wants to find out who he is, and by doing that, his life is at stake. And that's really all you need at this stage for a blurb. When you write your blurb for your book being published, those are the things you can take with you and make sure they're in your blurb. So people reading it go, oh, I want to read about this character, and this is a terrible problem to have. And look, they could die if this, if they make it or don't make it. So for me, the blurb starts really early in the writing process and helps you all the way through it. And even if you work with an editor, yes. you can send the editor the blurb, they fully understand your story intent. And they go, okay, this person wants to achieve this with the book. And so when they edit, they're keeping that in mind. And when something happens in the story that is not true to that intent, they can mention it and go, this is taking the story in a different direction. Or the climax scene didn't actually answer the story question. And without having that blurb, the editor has to figure out, well, what is the story question? And it might be something different than that the writer thinks. And so as an editor, it's super, super valuable to have that blurb. And it doesn't have to be a formal blurb for the editor. It's just those 3 things.
Yeah, and remember, don't include the spoilers, because it's to get us enticed, to get us involved in the story as we would read it. And of course, we're going to use that through there. We require that now when we do the story coach edits. We have that. We have a little survey so that we can make sure that we have all the information that we need to provide the best service to you. And if we omit that, it's just not serving yourself well. So you're going to have to do it at some point. So you get to practice on your first one with your editor. And then, like Kristina said, you can take that later and fluff it out more and really work for your promotion of your book. So it's very good. And then the 5 key points of the chart of the story arc will show you that. We show that all the time. In fact, that's where we're going right now,
yes,
ladies and gentlemen.
because. So when you're editing at this level, what's going to happen, and it can take weeks, months to do this. It's not a short task. But if you get your story in order before you do your scene by scene editing, then you're not wasting any time rewriting scenes that may be cut in half, may be deleted altogether, moved, and so they need to be rewritten because they've been moved. So it's very important to get your story structure straight first, and try not to do too much scene by scene editing. So if you look at this the story arc on the top left, you can see plot point 1 is too late, and same with plot point 2. And what this shows you, so when you see the orange line on the story arc, that's the actual manuscript that was inputted compared to what it should look like. And when it droops down from the inciting incident to plot point 1, it means the story there is going to feel slow. The pacing is going to feel off. The reader, after they get the inciting incident, is going to think, and readers don't know what plot point 1 is, but they know something should happen. And if it's not happening soon enough, they get frustrated or bored, which is terrible. Yeah. When the scenes occur too close together, like the plot point 1 and middle in the example are getting a little close because the line's getting a little steep. If that's really steep, probably means the story is lacking depth there, and that needs to be fixed up. And so what that means here is you're going to add new scenes in, or you're going to move scenes from before plot point 1 to after plot point 1, and those scenes will need to be rewritten. So again, that just reiterates why it's important to get your story straight first, because if you move a scene from before plot point 1 to after plot point 1, you have to rewrite it in that context that it fits the story flow. If you edit it before you did that, we're going to have to do it again because it has to be edited after so it fits the story flow. Exactly. And so what your goal is to have a story arc that looks like something on the right. And again, I do want to stress this is about form. And so there is leeway that it doesn't have to be exact, but you should be thinking about how do you get it close? And if it's not, is there a good reason for it not to be close? So that's my summary on the going back. So I'm sorry, I just want to say too, so the reason you go back to this is after you've done your high level revision, you're going to have a look at your story arc and see where it's at before you move on. So you want to look at it at the beginning and then at the end.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, again, this is all the high, making sure it's all there. So it's just kind of getting all your puzzle pieces together, making sure that they're there so that you can put the picture together. And it really helps you do this. And this is how the editors are looking at it. So mm-hmm. These are the tools we use. This is how it works. And again, it helps you identify where you are struggling or an area that maybe you're not completely solid in and where those challenges may be. And that helps your editor dig in on those areas as opposed to, spending too much time in other areas that, was just not that important to you or what you need. And you'll learn a lot. I mean, this really is, it's fun. It's called a story coach because you are being coached in how you edit yourself and how the editors edit for you. And so that you become much better at putting together stories later on. And, what was I was talking to somebody I was in this publishing seminar the other day, and they were talking about, that really now when you're going out, they want 4 to 8 books in a series when you're going into an agent, so ideally a minimum of 4, 8 if you're really good, because even if you are a really good story producer, they can't count on your promise that you're going to deliver. And so knowing how to produce your storylines, your story arcs, and have those laid out allows you to see the series there and how it all connects much easier. So it's just a small bit that you get to build on and repeat, and it gets easier and easier as it goes.
Yeah, and a good story editor is going to tell you what your story arc looks like, and it comes. And when you're revising your story after a story coach edit from a professional editor, you still want to do it in the same order. You want to look at their high level comments and fix that first before you go into the scene to scene ones, for the same reasons as when you're self-editing your own story, that you don't want to waste time. You want to try and do this as quickly as you can and work on the fun bits and not work on stuff that you're doing more than once, because that gets boring for all of us.
It's very true. Very,
Okay,
very true.
so that is the summary of everything we wanted to cover today. The next webinar is March 24th, and we're going to talk about scene by scene editing. And then March 31st, the week after, is how to edit your book like a professional editor. And it's do it yourself versus do it for you. And that is JoEllen's new acronym. I like it.
Oh, that's not new. That's not new.
I hadn't heard it before you said it. So it's new to me.
No. Oh, okay. No, it's really great. And so we have, make sure that you're following along on YouTube, make sure that you're following along in Eventbrite so that you're getting all this new information, and you can follow us both along, because next week I'll be hosting it. So it'll come out on a different channel there in different ways. But again, we have time for all of the questions, which I'm sure will come flooding in. And we'll deal with all those. But again, this is the high level, and then this is the second of a 4-part series. So please follow along. Please subscribe. If you subscribe to both of our YouTube channels, then you also want to, there's a big subscribe button, and then there's the bell. If you click the bell, it'll give you notices of what's coming up, and you'll stay informed.
Yeah. So there's a question on the bottom about agents. So every agent is different. And it's the same if you're submitting to a publisher. You want to make sure that you're submitting what they're looking for. If they're only looking for one book, then that's their choice. There are lots of agents who look for multiple books. So if you've done multiple books and that's what you're looking for, really the only advice I can give on that is to find an agent who is looking for that type of work. A way to attract an agent's attention, if that's the way you want to go, is through writing competitions. And quite often writers or agents and publishers look at those as kind of like the slush piles being done for them, that they look at the top winner, they look at the shortlisted list, and they look for books that they're interested in. And it's a great way to get an agent or publisher. And on that, I'm just going to share this right now. So this is, it's way there.
You gotta stay right in front of you.
Okay.
Put it in there.
Very hard to see. It's called A Comb of Wishes, and it's written by Lisa Stringfellow. And she was she edited her book in Fictionary. And she was one of our very first subscribers. And I love her story because she took that book and she gave it to an editor at a writing conference. At that writing conference, those editors were submitting the best ones they got that day into a literary award, and she won it. And by winning that, she got to another writers' conference where she met her agent, and then she had 5 publishing houses go to auction for her book. And then she signed a 2-book deal with HarperCollins. And now she's editing her second book back in Fictionary before she submits it to HarperCollins. And so her journey is a really interesting journey. I interviewed her, you can see it on our YouTube channel, of how she got the award and how that award helped her, how she got some really high-end reviews of her book. And I don't mean the ones on Amazon, but I mean actual published reviews on different magazines and newspapers and things. And so the book is called A Comb of Wishes. It's a fantasy book. And Lisa Stringfellow is the author. So you can just Google Lisa Stringfellow and you'll find it. But we're so proud of her. And one of the things we do at Fictionary for free is we promote authors' books. Anyone who's edited within Fictionary, we put it out on our network to help them sell it because we know how hard it is. And we do that for free just because we want to help writers.
Of course. Okay,
so there's something else here. I should really just put on glasses. I don't know why I'm not doing that. Now I can read it.
They want the slide deck.
Yeah, so I'll send that out when I send out the replay. I'll just attach the deck to it, and then everybody can have it. So Excellent. That's super easy. Okay, I'm just going to scroll back through. I'm going to remind everybody about the discount for Insider's View. And what the Insider's View course is, it was a group of 13 editors who edited the same book at the same time, but separately, using Story Coach software for editors. And we took the results, put them all together of I'll just say the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we evaluate the edits, and it shows you as a writer or an editor what a story edit is, and actual examples of editors editing.
Right. And I mean, the great part about this is that you have a way to measure the success of the editor. I mean, before now, it was, you had to base it completely on their experience and their individual and then their knowledge and all these other things, which is fine. I mean, you get great editors out there, but there's no guarantee. There's no standard. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to, there is, but there isn't. It's not written. Now it's, here it is. And for us at FirstEditing, it became very easy to offer, we've always offered a satisfaction guarantee, but it became so much easier to say, well, this is the highest level editing, and this is what you're going to get, and this is what we're going to deliver. And that, you're getting that professional summary letter, and it's going to include this. You're going to look at the word count. You're going to look at the story arc. You're going to look at the key scenes. We're going to put all that together, and then we're going to break it down, and we're going to embed the notes. We're going to give you feedback on this. And not only are we going to tell you, what you've done wrong, we're going to tell you what you've done right, and then we're going to show you exactly how to keep doing that right and where to do it again. So it's really super important.
So I see Mark Bertrand here is saying, as a self-publisher, I can tell you that KDP doesn't promote a book that is part in a series as much as a standalone book. Oh, that's interesting. So I didn't know that. So Mark, I'm actually interviewing next week. He has edited his book, third in his series. And Mark, just type the name of your book in the chat, if you don't mind. So I'm going to interview him, and that'll go up on our YouTube channel. And you can see how Mark did 3 books published, and what, basically how he edited his book and how he's come to have the success that he has had.
Exactly.
So
the question here about memoirs. Sorry, did I interrupt?
Yeah, no, I was just going to do that. The question is about memoirs. So yes, it works on memoirs. Okay, a conscious thing is from Mark. So yes, so if you go on Amazon, you can see a conscious thing. It's there, and you can buy it and be a supporter of Mark as an author. So Miriam, so does it work on memoirs? So the answer is yes, as long as it's a narrative memoir. So it's like narrative nonfiction. Same thing if you think of the book about the horse that everybody knows, the famous book about the horse. That's true, but it's written as a story, and I just can't come with it. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So as long as you're writing your memoir in the form of a story, and not in the form of just day 1 this happened, day 2 this happened. It's a very,
not a diary.
It's not it can be a diary. If you think of Bridget Jones's diary, and that could have been a true story, could have been a memoir, right? So it could be a diary, but not. If you're doing a detailed, say you were on a scientific expedition and you wrote a book about it, and it's the detail about the science and things, and it's not a story, it's the information about that journey. Different than a memoir that has a protagonist, and it has story goals, and it has tension and conflict and all of that. So it depends on the type of memoir you're writing.
Exactly. This is exciting.
Okay, good. I think we're probably pretty good for, looks like, unless anybody else, I'll just give it one more shout out for questions. And if not, we'll leave it at that. And then JoEllen, remind me of the date of the next webinar, because you're better.
The 24th and the 31st are the next 2. So we will skip next week. I'll be doing a self-editing seminar there with Pro-Writing Aid. And then we've got the next 2 on the editing essentials, which will wrap up the 4-part series. If you didn't see the first one, Kristina will include the link to that in the email that she sends as a follow-up, which will include all this information, and you can watch it again. Somebody said they're waiting for that. So, and she's promising the slide deck. So you have that. So you have those, and then sign up to that link because it will not be in the same category. So please make sure you sign up to the next one for the part 3. And we have A Comb of Wishes.
That's the name of the book I was showing. Thank you, Kara.
There we go. So thank you. Always a benefit to listening to both of you. Oh, thank you so much.
Feel good. Yay. Everybody needs to feel good, including us.
Yay.
Nice. Yeah. Well, thanks, everybody. It's really great and great questions. And we'll be back in 2 weeks.
See you again soon. Thank you.